Hey, good people. February is Black History Month, and I'm celebrating it by hosting a special event that I want to share with all of you. On Wednesday, February 17th, join me at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for Unblocking Our Blessing, a 75-minute virtual event on how we cultivate the sexiness we need to thrive on this planet in the months and years ahead. During this brief yet powerful and interactive webinar, I'll share my insight on what sexiness really is and why it's nothing to fear. I'll also provide you with concrete strategies for how to get that good kind of energy successfully flowing in all areas of your life. Towards the end of the session, I'll also provide you with info on how you can tap into my upcoming BSE Sex Ed Intensive set to begin later on this spring. Tickets for Unblocking Our Blessing are $20 and can be found under the Events tab on the T.S.O.B website. This event is open to everyone. However, in particular, no person of African descent will be turned away for inability to pay. There will also be closed captioning, and a recording will be provided for those who cannot attend live. For more info or specific questions, shoot us an email at mailbox@tsobpodcast.com. Now, let's start the show. Welcome to T.S.O.B with Dr. G, a podcast featuring intellectual table talk about race and sexuality. I'm your host, Dr. Tracy Q. Gilbert, a sexuality educator, writer, and researcher. Join me as I talk with the most brilliant minds in human sexuality, applying a professional Black lens to discussions about sexiness, health, and healing in the new millennium. It's T.S.O.B, the sex ed of Black folk. Let's get to the get down, shall we? Hello. Hey, everybody. Y'all already know how I feel. Every single episode, I always say I'm super excited, and I am still very super excited today. I'm telling y'all, this season is all about introducing you all to the folks that I feel like are fundamental in terms of understanding what are we talking about when we're talking about sexuality and Black folks. And this person is no exception. I'm talking about none other than Dalychia Saah of Afrosexology. We're going to read her bio, and then we are going to get into it. Dalychia Saah uses she and her pronouns, and she is a sexuality educator, professor, writer, and speaker. Through her words and work, Dalychia facilitates space for people to connect deeper with their desires for their body, relationships, life, and our world. She is passionate about people unlearning oppressive norms that are externalized, interpersonalized, and internalized that keep us from moving towards a more liberated way of being. Dalychia believes that systematic forces of oppression can be overthrown by a reclamation of intra and interpersonal power. Dalychia is the co-founder of Afrosexology, a pleasure-based sex education platform that creates educational content and workshops to center the pleasure, empowerment, and liberation of Black people. So you know that's always my jam, and I'm here for that. Afrosexology's work covers topics such as masturbation, self-love, enhancing communication and relationships, radical twerking, which I want to learn about that, racialized sexual oppression, body agency, and much more. Through Afrosexology, Dalychia has created space for tens of thousands of people of color to reclaim their sexuality and body agency. On top of Afrosexology, Dalychia is a lecturer professor at the Brown School of Social Work at Washington University in St. Louis. So shouts out to St. Louis. And she teaches graduate level courses in social theory, social justice, and sexuality education. She is also a sought after facilitator and keynote speaker for conferences and events related to social justice and or sexuality. Dalychia's work and words have been featured in Huffington Post, Teen Vogue, Allure Magazine, Vibe Magazine, Glamour Magazine, pretty much all the magazines here. And she's received the Phenomenal Woman Award, the Spirit of Social Work Award, the Reverend Robert Gilbert Advocacy Award, and the Academy for Leadership and Civic Engagement Leadership Award. So again, phenomenal, dope people. obviously Dalychia fits right into the four. So without further ado, thank you so much for being on T.S.O.B. Dalychia, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me,
Hello.
Tracy. Like, honestly, hearing you read that bio out loud, I was like, oh man, I forgot about all of that stuff. Like,
Right?
you put a bio up on your website, you don't look at it for like 4 more years, and you're like, oh, I be doing things.
Uh-huh. Yes. And sometimes you need that reminder of like, oh, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I'm out here. I'm doing it. Yes. So thank you. Thank you so much. And yes, I just want to big up you and all the work that you do. Like, you know what? Let me stop because every time I'm like, I have all of these stories, and I think of people where I'm like, if there's someone who I feel like is perfect in terms of talking about Black sexuality, or who is doing it in a way where I'm like, I aspire, right?
Mm.
You are one of those folks, absolutely. Like I said that to
Oh,
Erica
thank you.
Hart. I definitely feel that, and I definitely feel like you. Like, oh, just I stand. So, thank
Thank
you again
you.
for
Thank
being
you.
on the show. So let's just get into the Q&A. So my first question, I ask everyone, break it down for me. Where you from? Where your people from? And what's got you thinking about sexuality these days?
Mm, yes, I love this question. So, I am from Houston, Texas. I currently live in St. Louis, Missouri. I've been here for 6, 7 years, so I should probably start calling it home. But I am Texas all the way through. But my family are from Liberia. My family's from Liberia, which is a country off of the west coast of Africa. It's a country founded by freed African American slaves who, when slavery was over, they were like deuces and went back to the continent, and found a country. And so that has been really, really important for my narrative, for my just like understanding, because I come from people who in a sense got black reparations, got liberation, like named the country after this idea of liberation, and then went around and pretty much replicated the systems of oppression that they left. And so
Mm.
yeah, that work is super important to me. My mother comes from a descendant of like American Liberians, and my father's indigenous, and so a lot of like very different upbringings. Very much created a system where that feels like America, and enslaved indigenous people and created all of these like positions where indigenous people were not allowed to have political, economic, and social agency in their country, which led to the Civil War, which is why we're in this country again.
Mhm.
And so for me, the question that's always on the front of my mind is like, it's not just enough to feel like once we escape this stuff, we're going to be free. It's really trying to understand the ways that we've internalized and normalized these oppressive ways of being.
Mhm.
And I want people to not just know what we don't want. I want people to get really clear on what we do want, which is why I love doing sex ed work, because I'm like,
Yes.
liberation is desire work. I want to know what our dreams are, what we're working towards. And it scares me sometimes that I feel like we're not having those conversations in the same way. But yeah, but that's where my people from. So grew up rural, in a very much immigrant community. Houston is a huge population of Liberians, so grew up around a lot of like immigrants. Um, yeah, and so that's it's been
Yeah.
fun taking that perspective, and then also growing up Black American, which is a perspective that my parents didn't get because they grew up in a country with a bunch of Black people, trying to help them address their own anti-Blackness as Africans and all of that stuff. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
my
yeah.
people.
Oh, yes. I love it. I love it. And there's so much in what you said where I'm just like percolating that I'll get to in a second. But wait, did we answer the question of what's got you thinking about sex these
Oh,
days?
thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so what's got me thinking about sex? I am in a space right now, and like last year and this year, where I am very much trying to become obsessed with my body. Like I'm doing so much body adornment, body
Mhm.
worshiping. I just realized that I've always been a thinker, and so I've always just like prioritized my brain. I've always prioritized the fact that I'm a really quick thinker, and I have ignored my body, and also just
Mhm.
had a relationship of like not caring for it. And so I'm like in the space of being super tender and like just like really trying to prioritize my body and like celebrate it and love on it and like care for it in a way that I never have. And so it is it is just making me think about like sex and the body and sexuality and expressing my body in a really different way that I haven't expressed in a long time because I've been so focused on like school and work and my
Yes.
head.
Yes, I love that so much. And absolutely that's resonant for me. I think I talked about that in the episode we had with Goody Howard, which I'm realizing I'm like, we got all these Texas people in the room, like in on the show. Like you're now the third person
Yes.
from Texas who's been here, and that's amazing. But I talk about how I entered this discussion very much through the head, right? And I think a lot of that is absolutely related to race because that was how you succeeded, as especially
Yeah.
as a Black
Yep.
femme. Prioritize the head, stop and silence that body. And so the reconnection work of getting back into the body, that's been part of my journey too. I acknowledge I'm not as successful as I would like to be some days, but that's definitely resonant for me. The idea of like, what does it take to reconnect and how do we do that work to reconnect? And not only reconnect, but prioritize the needs and the
Yeah.
desires of the body. So that's so dope. That's so dope. Um, so a question that's coming up for me, thinking about your experience and your family's experience with Liberia, and I'm curious if you've thought at all, or if you have, what your thoughts are about how that experience has shaped your perception of liberation and what it means to be a liberated being. And particularly in light of what you said about kind of how those systems of oppression got recreated. Um,
Yeah.
if you have any thought, like what's your thought about how that has shaped your understanding of liberation and what that
Yeah.
really looks like?
So my biggest thought is that white people are not free. White people are not liberated, and I think we get really confused because we think that what white people have is liberation, is
Mhm.
freedom, but their freedom is based on other people being oppressed, which is not freedom. Their freedom is very like
Mm.
scarcity oriented. It is insecure, and so I think there's a lot of times when people are like, well, even like recently with the Capitol Hill thing with white people trying to take over
Oh,
the
yeah,
government,
yeah,
whatever they were doing. Um, white on white crime, doing all their stuff. People were like, "Oh, it's the freedom for me. It's the fact that they can do anything without consequences." And I'm like, "That's not freedom." But people, you should know that the actions that you have on other people has consequences. Like
yeah. Mhm.
that is a part of being in a relationship with people. Is that like what I do affects other people, and I should understand that and take actions with that in mind. So just the idea of like you could do whatever you want and there's no punishment, there's no consequences. I'm like, that's not freedom. So for
Mm.
me, what I have taken away from like Liberia is that like we have to get really clear on redefining, returning to indigenous ways or whatever, but like redefining for us ourselves what is the goal that we're striving for, like what is it that we want, and not just feeling like what we want to replicate what white people have.
Yeah, that is so valuable. That is so valuable. I think about that a lot. We're recording this. This won't come out anywhere close to this, but we're recording this the week of the inauguration and with the new
Hmm.
administration in power. And one of the things I think about very often with that is this idea of like, is it liberation if we're just replacing, if it's just about
Yeah,
representation, right? And we don't
yeah.
like, this is not a show where I want to get too far into like things that don't literally concern the materiality of sex. But I think for me that is something I think about often. Like, okay, do we want freedom or do we want representation? Like, do we want to just have?
Do
And
you want
so,
freedom or do you want to be white? It's the question I ask people all the time. Do you want to be free or do
yeah.
you want to be white? Which is and I agree. I don't like talking a lot about politics, but I do think like sex has given me a space to redefine my relationship to concepts like power, right? Where
Mm,
for me, like I used to really be afraid of power. I used to really think that like I'd only see people who had power and would exploit it or would use it in these harmful ways because I was connecting to power to what I was seeing replicate in society. And then here comes the kink community who is like teaching me different ways
mm,
to be in relationship with power, to hold power, to be a dom who is not doing what they want to do because of their dom, but they're doing what the submissive wants them to do, that the submissive has the power. And so seeing those dynamics has helped me to be like, okay, like what does it mean to hold power in a way that is responsible for the people who are trusting you to lead them, which is
yeah.
not the model that I've been seeing represented. So I think polyamory community has taught me how to redefine love in a way that isn't around scarcity or ownership, which is what I was seeing, right? But to see love in a way that is abundance and that is very much like we get to choose to be together and we get to choose to separate when it's no longer working for us and we get to choose to add other people in, and that does not mean that I love you any less, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas we're
yeah.
currently in a system that feels like if Black people get justice, there's less justice for white people. So
Right.
there's like all these like scarcity over here. And so I think for me, the sex ed community has really helped me to redefine my relationship to these terms that feel more liberated.
Yes. Okay. So we're gonna get into all of that. Before we do that though, because I'm like, oh, you bringing up this and we're gonna talk about this too. Before we do that, tell us the story of how you even got into sex ed. Like, how did you even get to sex ed, and what was it that clicked for you in terms of being able to link sex ed to all of these other ideas that you now have?
Yeah, so I have always been curious around sexuality. You know, I grew up in a house of people with parents who were very much like, if you have a question, go research it, go learn the answer. Except for when it came to questions about sex and questions about religion, you weren't supposed to like question those things. But they had
Mm.
already taught me all the skills of what it means to go look for the answers yourself. And so I was the person who I am so grateful for the internet. If it was not for the internet, I don't think I would be here today. But I was the person who was like Googling and like looking up like how do you give someone like your first kiss? How do you like hold someone's hand? How do you like all of these things? Like just like trying to understand sex in this like
Mhm.
really young age. And I was the person in my high school who was like advocating for condoms in Texas, so abstinence schools.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah,
was just a
yeah.
lot. And so for a long time, I was interested in sexuality, but I felt like I couldn't really make a career out of it. Like I look back and my 16-year-old birthday gift from my boyfriend at the time was like a human sexuality textbook. Like it was clear to everyone else what I was
Mm.
doing, but to me, I was like, no, I can never really. That's not a thing. Like in undergrad, I was like, can I take a sexuality course? When I got to grad school, the first class I enrolled in was a sexuality course. And the professor was like, you are a sex educator. And I'm like, no, I am not. Because Black people have other things going on to be talking about sex. I really thought that talking about sex was like frivolous, that it was extra,
Distracting.
that it was, yeah, it was not like we
Mhm.
are dying, we are trying to like feed ourselves, we're trying to like get free, and like once we get free, then we'll get to talk about sex. We could get there. And so it really wasn't until being in St. Louis, Ferguson protests, reading Audre Lorde, that I really started to connect like how sex connects to Black freedom, like how it is important for us to re-relate to our bodies in really healthy and loving and affirming ways. And I was beginning to see the ways that this oppressive system was not just impacting our experience with white people, but impacting our experiences with each other and ourselves when it relates to our bodies. And so for me, it came from that. I really just wanted to create a space, and I'm like, I wish I had this when I was younger, and I want a community that can hold me as I grow. And I wanted something that didn't feel super like, I know as I'm talking, I sound super heady, but like Afrosexology is very much like, let's just talk about what feels good. I'm so tired of Black people getting a space and just talking about trauma, pain, the bad stuff. Like, let's
Yeah.
just talk about what feels good. And so to create space for Black people to just talk about oral, talk about masturbation, talk about like just like the senses that we like to connect with, to talk about like fucking, to talk about riding dick, like whatever. Like let's just talk about things that feel good and how can we do more and experience more pleasurable things in this lifetime. So
Yeah.
yeah, so after grad school, Rafaela and I met in grad school, and then we decided to just like, let's just create something. So we created Afrosexology. We were both unemployed at the time, so we had lots of time. And within 3 weeks of being like, let's do this, we birthed Afrosexology, and now we're
That's
6 years
beautiful.
in, and it has grown. It has grown to just be this amazing community of Black people talking about pleasure, and like in a way that is shame free, in a way that is so affirming, in a way that is so vulnerable. And I am just really grateful for the community that we've been able to build and nurture.
That's beautiful. Yes, yes, yes. And tell folks, Rafaela is your business partner. Tell us a little bit more about
Yes,
Rafaela.
yes. So Rafaela is my business partner. She, her pronouns, and is also a sex therapist. And so
Yes. So
she
at
runs
some
a sex
point,
therapy practice called Healing
yeah,
Exchange. Yeah.
beautiful. Yes. At some point, we'll bring you both back, and we'll talk. We'll get more into Afrosexology in particular there. But I want to touch on something you said. That I think we don't talk about it enough in the profession, and I think a lot of this is connected to race, and hopefully we'll get into that. Um, is the idea of Black folks have too much on our plate to be thinking about sex, to be
Yeah,
thinking about pleasure,
yeah,
right? Like, I think a lot of the narrative when we talk about sex negativity in the profession, and I think it's because of a function of white supremacy, is the idea that, oh, if someone's not talking about sex, it's because they don't like it. It's because they're afraid of it. It's because they're anti sex pleasure, all of those things. And what you're saying is very resonant to me in that I remember growing up feeling very much like sex is, it seems like a great thing. Like it's something that people enjoy it. It's awesome. However, it's not something that as a Black person you can prioritize because you have to focus on, not becoming a statistic. You have to focus on,
yeah,
keeping yourself safe, keeping your family safe. You have to focus on getting these coins and making money. And I think because of that, I have seen, especially with Black femmes, the priority list, sex just getting further and
yeah,
further and further down,
yeah,
especially when you marry it to the idea of it being in a relationship and added that it has to, and only way it's virtuous is if it's in a loving relationship, but then finding out,
yeah,
your field of eligibles isn't as big. And to me, I think to get to liberation in the ways that you're talking about, we have to value sex. Like we have to bring it further up on our list and recognize that it's not just about orgasm. Like orgasm is great,
yeah,
and orgasm alone should be one of the reasons why we're pursuing it, but it is the key to so many other
yeah,
pieces, which is why
yeah.
it's also important.
Yeah, and I love that, I think more and more sex educators are beginning to understand that the skills that we're teaching are not just skills that are helpful for people during sex, but like in all realms of their life, that we're teaching
Yes.
people the skill of boundaries, or we're teaching people how to ask for what they want. And that's whether
Yes.
you're like having sex with somebody and like or navigating a relationship, and also with your boss, like learning how to ask for a promotion, ask for what you
Yes.
want, set them boundaries and be like, I'm not answering emails after 5. Like, like these are
Yes.
skills that we haven't been taught because it's just become really, it is in the best interest of those who want us to oppress for us to believe that like we don't deserve to feel good. We don't deserve pleasure. We don't
Mm.
deserve to
Mhm.
experience healthy, loving, affirming relationship. And we should just normalize these really unhealthy dynamics because then
Yeah.
it makes it easier to normalize the unhealthy dynamic that we have to them.
Yeah. Or that we don't need pleasure to thrive, right? Like that we
Yes.
don't need pleasure. Like I think about this, our grand patroness, Mary J. Blige turned 50 this year, right? Like she's
Mhm.
one of my patronesses. Absolutely. And she posted a video of herself just enjoying the beach, right? Just lit, like,
Yeah.
she's been doing things, with the fitness, and she had her bikini on and she was like, she been popping, but she put this
Yeah.
video out and it was just her in such bliss. And for me, that was so special because I remember her saying, all I really want is to be happy. And I
Yeah.
remember our community saying, you know what? I like Mary more when she's sad. I like more when she's making songs with drama and about her,
Mhm.
the drama that she like. I like her music more that way. And it was like, wow, like
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
process of being able to own her pleasure and own that she had a right to be happy. And if that means that I'm not giving you no more sad songs, if that means that I'm not going to portray this narrative, and I think Jasmine Sullivan is another example of this, where
Yeah.
early on in her career, they wanted her to be the, drama, and my man is dogging me and all of these things. And I think that's part of that work of reclaiming and being like, no, pleasure. I want to be
Yeah.
happy. I get to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just resonant for me, thinking of what you're saying. So amen to pleasure.
Amen and ashe. Yes.
Right? So another question that I ask, and you may already have kind of talked about it, but another question that I ask everyone is, what is your sex ed superpower? What do you feel like your sex ed superpower is?
I love this question. Thank you so much. So my power is being a dreamer, and I mean that I am fully embracing what it means to be a dreamer.
Mm,
I am somebody who I have dreams every night, active wild dreams every night. I daydream all day, and I am a Pisces. And so I am like have dream
yes.
energy, who was raised, my mom, my dad, my grandmother, my grandfather, my partner, all Pisces, also all dream energy around. And I was raised to be a dreamer who's also a doer. And I'm super grateful to my parents for that. Like there have been so many things when I was like, I wish this existed. My parents were like, you need to do it. And they always instilled in me this idea that like, no matter what you wanted, if you like, you could get it. Like, it was just like not a question about it. I remember being like 15 to 17 and being like, oh, I wish there was like more westernized, like African clothing so I could wear it and feel like fashionable and not feel like super traditional. My mom was like, start a clothing line. And I was like, I don't know nothing about that. She was like,
Duh.
I'm your first investor. We're gonna figure it out. And then my friend and I created a clothing line for like that we ran for like 4 years. And so it's always
Wow.
been like, if you want something, do it. And so Afrosexology was birthed out of a dream, and I've created other communities like with Shadeen Francis. We have like a retreat where we
It
bring
should
together
be.
sex educators to, yes, love her. Where we bring together sex entrepreneurs to really like share some business skills because I wanted that knowledge. I run this group where we do platonic touch events for people of color because I really wanted more platonic touch in my life. So like I'm someone who I'm just like, if I have a dream, if I want to do something, I'm going to pursue it. I'm going to build it. And I just really appreciate being like someone who is a dreamer and who is a creative and who is a creator who feels empowered to create. And so yeah, I think it's something that I've been trying to introduce myself as more. I think in capitalism, people are interested in me being a teacher and a writer, but I am starting to be like, I am a dreamer. This is a gift that I am honing and trying to learn how to be more in relationship with, and what does it mean to like embrace that part of myself that isn't really valued under this capitalistic system.
Yeah.
That's my power.
Yeah.
I dream all the time. I have wild dreams and I enjoy it. And yes.
Yes. And oh my goodness, that is such a perfect segue into my next question because I have my ideas about how this works, but I'm like, I want to hear your perspective first and see if this is resonant for you. Um, as it relates to Black folks, right? Where do you feel like, or how do you feel like this shows up with regard to the experiences of Black folks, just everyday Black folks? And where do you feel like we may miss our opportunities when it comes to dreaming and putting our dreams in
Mm,
motion and capitalizing on the good stuff that you're talking about?
yeah. Ooh, yeah. I mean, that brings up for me just like a lot of heartbreak. Like I just see a lot of people who I feel like are dealing with heartbreak and different types of like not just romantic, but just like being a kid and like wanting to do something, your parents just like not encouraging it because they were trying to prepare you to survive and not to like be a dreamer and to get your and trying to prevent you from experiencing more pain by like enforcing that pain now. And so I see people who are really like heartbroken and who don't believe in themselves, who don't believe in what they want to pursue, who don't
Yeah.
believe that they deserve to experience good things, good relationships, a good work relationship, and just like pleasure and orgasm. So and that makes me really sad. I feel really
Yeah.
heartbroken by it.
Yeah.
I want a world where everyone feels like affirmed and feels seen and feels like super connected to their desires and feel like they can actualize it. Like I really want people to feel like this is your birthright. Like there's and the
Mhm.
biggest lie in my mind is this idea that we're not enough or that we're too much instead of just be like you are enough. You can
Mhm.
go for it. You
Yeah.
deserve it. And I also think that like Christianity plays into this. I grew up really religious, and this idea that like you'll get what you deserve when you die and you're in heaven. And
Mhm.
capitalism is the same thing when it's like you'll get what you deserve. You could take the vacation after you work your ass off and you're exhausted, then you earn the
Yeah.
vacation. This idea that we have to earn pleasure, I think, is one of the biggest myths that we really need to like let go of.
Mhm.
Instead of being like, no, you can experience and you deserve to experience pleasure now, all the time, all in all
No
ways,
matter
you
what.
know, and it doesn't
Yeah.
have, yeah, and you don't have to earn it, you don't have to change for it. There's nothing you need to do to be more deserving of a healthy, loving relationship to yourself or to other people. You should be able, you deserve that now,
Mhm.
just as you are.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for saying that because
Mhm.
what I was thinking about as you were talking about dreaming, right, was the experience that I remember having growing up. And fortunately, I've been able to do my own work like about kind of healing that was this idea of dreaming was just for that, right? Dreaming with the
Yeah.
understanding that it wasn't going to come true. It's just an opportunity to kind of detach from the world and kind of be in this visionary space. And I distinctly remember on a generational level hearing elders in my community talk all this stuff about what they're going to do and what they're going to do, and also hearing the jadedness of people being like, oh, you're not really going
Yeah.
to do that, that's not really going to happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even I remember working with young people, and I think when I spent a lot of time working directly with young people, I used to really do my best to do what I say what I was going to do, because I think there was such an expectancy that it's not going to happen, to where if something
Yeah.
fell through, they wouldn't even be surprised. It would be like, okay, yeah, sure, because when do we ever, as Black people, as poor people, as hood people, when do we ever get to see our dreams be accomplished? And so
Yeah.
what you're like, I appreciate you saying that, because I think that was definitely resonant for me, specifically in the case of Black folks, because so much of our dreams have been deferred, like
Yeah.
literally, to where
Yeah.
you develop that consciousness that you don't expect and it doesn't
Yeah.
happen. So, speaking of dreaming, I'm curious what you think, Dalychia, in terms of whether or not you think the shifts that have been happening in our society, with kind of, we're seeing, some of the old
Mm.
infrastructures fall apart and fall down, if you think that dreaming is going to have more of a resonance and have more of a place in terms of people being able to actualize the things that they're actually dreaming for as we move ahead.
That's a great and big question, and I see, I go back and forth. Like I am super optimistic, and I am very much a dreamer, and so I always am like, oh my God, we're getting so close to liberation, and then I'm also really tender. I often am like, I am tender-headed and tender-hearted, so I get really like sad really quickly when I'm like, oh no, we're so far. And so I think I'm seeing both of that a lot. Like I remember when the pandemic first started happening, I was like, oh man, as humans, as a species, we are gonna come together because we need to survive. Like,
Yeah.
and it's not about us fighting another country. It's like us as a species, as a world, coming together to survive. And then when I saw how people were like acting like with like hoarding toilet paper, I was like, oh, okay.
Mm.
Like we are not, we are not there. But I think I'm seeing both, and like what we are in right now with this like pandemic and the states with this like political shift. I feel like we're seeing the failings of these systems that we have held up as working for so long, which I think Black people have been saying since the beginning, like this ain't it, like this ain't working. I think more people are understanding, like, oh, not having universal health care in the middle of a pandemic where people are losing their jobs is not working, right? And this is, people have been asking for universal health care and have been, as if it's like some far away impossible dream, right? And I
Mhm.
think people are like now saying like we need to do this. We are having beautiful conversations about what abolition means and getting to a place of being like, oh, this like prison system is not working. Like y'all have had time and it is failing. Like the judicial system, all of this. Like let's reimagine abolition and what it means to like build different ways of providing safety for ourselves. And so those conversations feel really exciting for me. And I think more people are feeling like the fact that abolition is like a word that most people are talking about now when they're like, was it? Is like exciting. I'm
Mm.
like, okay, I think where we're at is like this place of like, okay, this stuff isn't working. And I think a lot of us are like, but what could work? And so that is a beautiful space to birth dreams, right? To birth like,
Yeah.
well, maybe let's just imagine other things. Like, what would you want to see happen? Like, don't tell me what you think is possible. Tell me what you would like to see.
Yeah.
And we're also in a space where a lot of people are inside the house with a partner or and recognizing like this relationship either is not working or this relationship needs a lot of like tenderness and like care. It's been, we've been ignoring it. And so there's also this space of like I think we're getting really clear on like what needs to be let go of, and then what do we want to replace it with is a space that I think for dreams can happen. And so I'm
Yeah.
hoping that people are seeing this time and these like endings in a lot of ways as a space for us to like reimagine what we want to place these systems with.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll
Definitely.
see.
Yeah, we'll
We'll
see. We
see
don't
what our
know. We'll
future
see.
does.
But yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's part of why I asked that question, because, you know, it sounds like the work that you all do, especially with Afrosexology, is facilitating this space for people to imagine things that they may not have even thought were possible
Yeah.
as it relates to their own
Yeah.
sexuality and their own sex lives, right? So can
Right.
you talk a little bit more about that, right? Like about how do you take someone who maybe is used to just thinking about sex being some fringe thing that they do, maybe if they're lucky and they find a good partner, maybe if they've got time and they're not exhausted, maybe when the kids aren't, getting on their nerves. How do you take them through to getting to a space of recognizing like, wow, not only are my sexual desires possible, but they're valid and they're important and
Mm,
I am going to prioritize them.
yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah, so I feel like one of my favorite places to start is not even like asking people to like take action, but just asking people to tap into their feelings. I think we very much ignore the way that we feel and we get very caught up on like the act of doing. And for me, the way that we feel in the middle of the act is just as important. And so taking it away from like sex is just like, how are you feeling when you wake up in the morning? How are you feeling when you are eating these meals? How are you feeling when you're listening to this podcast? How are you feeling when you're hanging out with these people? How are you feeling when you're like helping your kid with homework? And just starting to like note the ways that we're feeling, and then can we be intentional about moving towards the things that make us feel good and just doing more of those? For me, honey dew melon is so good. Like every time I eat it, I'm just like, why am I not eating this all the time? Like I feel so excited. It's so sweet in my mouth, and I just like I'm trying to like tap into that to be like, okay, I like this thing. I like the way it makes me feel. I like the way it like feels in my mouth. I want to try to get more honeydew so that I can eat more of the things that make me feel good. Because I think a lot of us just normalize things feeling really bad, or we just like
Yes.
we navigate life really numb, and we just think like that's how it's supposed to be. Where our friendships are supposed to make us feel more insecure, or supposed to feel more,
Mm,
or like less seen or shamed. That like the work relationship, like I remember my dad telling me like work is supposed to be depressing, and I was just like, that's awful. Like
like,
but
yeah.
we just normalize it, like it's just supposed to be depressing that I people like wake up and they're just like ready to get back into bed. They're just like dragging their feet throughout their day. So
Yeah.
I think we just normalize that feeling in so many parts of our life, which makes it that much easier to normalize it in sex, right? To just normalize it that like I'm gonna have the sex and I don't expect for anyone to care about my pleasure. I don't expect for my orgasm to be prioritized. I don't expect to ask for what I want because they're not gonna do it anyway. I don't expect for my needs to be met. And that is just a part of us continuing to normalize so like we don't deserve to feel good. And so
Yeah.
trying to tap into those feelings, I think is a really beautiful place to start, to just know what friends make you feel good, what friends make you feel like energized and supported and seen, what food makes your tummy feel like it wants to dance, like what smells do you like I'm really into jasmine, so like just like getting into like how can I light jasmine, my incense with jasmine in the day so that the room that I walk into smells good. Like how can we just really tap into the things that make us feel good and doing more of those?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking about what you said about work, right? And just how normal
Yeah,
it is for people to hate their jobs. And like, yeah,
yeah,
it's totally okay that my boss, I can't stand her, and that my boss cursed me out. And I was totally, I was mad, but I went back to work the next day and I didn't question it. And
yeah.
disappointment it does seem to be so infused into so many of our
Mhm.
experiences, and being able to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. I am going to quit. I'm going to do something
Yeah,
else. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with dreaming too, and recognizing like, if I do quit this unpleasurable experience, I can do so with the faith and the expectation that there will be something better waiting for me. So I do
yeah,
acknowledge that it does go
yeah,
hand in hand, and there's that faith work
yeah.
that has to be built up as well.
Yeah,
Um,
or just start making an exit strategy. Don't normalize it like this is how it has to be. It's gonna be the same forever. Even if it takes you 5, 10 years to make your exit plan, just know that you deserve a work
yeah,
environment or a relationship or whatever that makes you feel good. And
yeah.
if that means you gotta do whatever you gotta do to make it happen, know that you are deserving of it.
Yes, yes, amen. Amen, amen. Um, okay, so let's get into some of the specific sexuality topics you mentioned earlier. I know you talked about kink. I know you also talked about
I always talk about masturbation. So
yes.
polyamory, I should have said that earlier.
Oh, that yes, polyamory, right? So
Mhm.
let's talk about kind of what your thoughts are on kink and polyamory and how those tie into what you're saying about, you mentioned some of it with kink, but how it ties into what you're saying about kind of learning what you want, expressing what you want, commanding what you want, and pushing back past some of those boundaries of like, well, I don't do this,
Yeah.
and I don't like this, and so on and so forth. Well, not necessarily I
Yeah.
don't like this, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So for me, what I have really enjoyed about the sex ed community or just like the sexuality community in general is being around people who are just like so authentically expressing their eroticism, their desires for like their like sex, their desires for relationships, their desires for the world. Like they're just like, this is what I want and I'm gonna go after it. No matter the king community has shown me like no matter what it is, what no matter what it is, if it is something that you want and it is consensual for the other person involved, you can make it happen. That is so amazing. I mean, I was
Mhm.
talking to somebody. Actually, I'm gonna give no, I don't know if they want their name attached to this, but I was talking to someone who is in the kink world, a black femme who I adore, who was just saying that like one of her first scenes with the as a submissive, she was playing this like game where she was like trying to like play hard to get and she was teasing him and the guy was just like, if you want me to spank you, just ask for it. And I was
Mm,
like, that is powerful to just be like, we don't have to play all of these like games that we've been scripted into. If you want something to
yeah,
happen, just ask for it and I will do it. Like
yeah.
how
And
many
Delisha,
times are we in relationships?
yeah, I was just
Yeah.
going to ask you really quickly. Can you explain for the folks what you mean when you say submissive, and just real quick, what does that mean?
Yes, yes. So when we're talking about thank you. When we're talking about submissive and dominance, we're talking about power dynamics. And so we're talking about like a submissive as somebody who is submitting to another, to submitting their power to another person, and the dominant is a person who has like has the power, but honestly it is just more of an exchange where the submissive gets to say like these are the terms of what I want to experience, and the dominant does those things. So there's
Hmm.
many different ways to that those power dynamics can play out, but it really is just like like having an intentional relationship with someone where you are exchanging power.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
Uh,
But yes, going back to what you were saying
yeah.
about if you want to be spanked, just ask for it.
Yeah, and I was just like when she said it, I was like, "That's so simple and so profound." Like, so profound
Hmm.
because there's so many things where we feel like we have to play all these games all
Yeah,
the time and dating and navigating white people. We just always gotta be playing all these games, and we
yeah,
can't just ask for what we want because we do not trust that the people around us will give it to us.
yeah,
And so just like this idea of like, if you want something, just ask for it was
yeah,
super helpful for me. And so there's many lessons that come up in the sex world around ways to relate to your body, ways to relate to other people, where it just feels so counter to what we're currently doing in our everyday life. That feels really
yeah,
helpful.
yeah.
I know for me, like masturbating is a thing that I talk about all the time in Afrosexology. It is my favorite topic, and um, it was something that I had so much shame around. Like I just used to pride myself on being the girl who like did not need to masturbate. Like I thought masturbation was like
Mm,
something that desperate women did, and I just was like, I don't need to do that. I can just go get the real thing. Even though the real hetero sex I was having was not pleasurable, was not good, and
mhm.
nobody would tell you about my clitoris. And so the first time that I ever brought myself to orgasm, I was like, oh, this is sex. Like I was like, this is this is what I've been not experiencing. And it
Right.
was just so powerful to be like, I can do this on my own. Oh my gosh. I was just like,
Yeah,
oh, well, I'm not wasting my time no more. Like after that, it was like I would find myself in situations with people and they would be like, I'm not I'm they were there's one guy who was like, I'm doing what your body's telling me to do, even though I was verbally telling him to do something else. And I was just
right.
like, I'm gonna sit here and take this. I'm gonna leave. I can masturbate. I can and just like once I like for me it was like, well, what else can I do by myself? Like what else do I already have within me, right? Like I was very much raised to think that my pleasure had to come from somebody outside of me, that it came from some man, that my liberation came from white people, and masturbating was like, can I liberate myself? Like can I bring myself all this pleasure, all this power? Like what's within me that I don't have to be waiting for somebody else to do for me? And so I am just really grateful to sexuality, to these spaces for the lessons that I've learned when it comes to sex has also translated to like all aspects of my life.
Yeah, yeah. I love what you I love what you say, and I think it's definitely resonant to me that I've learned in being in sex ed spaces and sexuality spaces, just how freeing it can be to just say what's on your mind and not
Yeah,
have to worry, because I think there's also the piece of like, even if you say yes, depending on who you are, you may judge me for having wanted to ask that in the first place. And I think about
yeah,
that a lot with the experiences of men who may want to experience things that may be coded as, oh, homosexual or,
yeah,
gay shit or whatever. And being able to have a space where it's like, okay. And even if I say no, it's not no, how dare you? It's no, I'm not interested
yeah,
in that, but it's okay,
yeah,
right? And so I think there's the piece that's coming up in my mind of not only asking but also cultivating a space where the ask can be made
mhm,
and it's okay.
mhm,
And I think in
mhm,
our community too, there's some learning and some growing that can happen there around being like, yeah, actually, I would like you and your friends to run a train on me, and
yeah,
that's okay, even if you don't
yeah,
want to do it, right? Or I would
yeah,
like you to um, use this plug on me, and it's okay, it's there's no shame if you don't want to do it. It's just I'm going to be able to ask. And
yeah,
so I
yeah,
that's definitely resonant for me, this idea of just being able to be free to even ask. And
yeah. Audre Lorde said, "We have been taught to fear the yes within us. We've been taught to
yeah,
fear, like, the things that we want, the things that we wanna ask for." And
yeah,
so, yes, that's a skill in itself, and then we also don't know how we haven't been taught how to do rejection in a way that is okay. We haven't been taught to how
yes,
to give rejection, and we haven't been taught to receive rejection, right? And
yeah,
so, there's so many skills in sex, again, that translate to all aspects of our life. So, like,
yeah,
how do you say yes to something that you want? How do you ask for what you want? How do you say no in a
yeah,
way that isn't shaming, that isn't belittling, that isn't like, putting someone down for their ask, but just like, no, I'm not interested. And then how do you hear that no and not be like, well, fuck you then? And then like,
right,
and react in a, like you a bitch or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Thank you for letting me know. Like,
right,
how,
right,
how amazing is it that somebody was honest with you and said no, which also means you can trust when they say yes, that they want to do this,
yes.
that they actually want to do it, and they don't feel coerced or pressured. And isn't that what y'all want? Don't you want
Right?
the man?
Isn't that what we say we want? Right. And I also want to be clear to listeners, like I think it's important to understand that these discussions are across the spectrum, right? So even if it's something as simple, like I remember a story from my experience of wanting to have tell a partner, I want you to make love to me. Right. Like I like being able to say that. Like I remember feeling like this feels so awkward to be like, would you
Yeah,
make love to me? Would you hold
yeah,
me? Would you give me a hug? Like I think uh I don't know that and I don't know that we have space to get into them, but for a lot of reasons, I think even negotiating just basic intimacy in our community
yeah.
can be a challenge.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
to where the vulnerability it takes to just say, would you please just hug me? Would you please
Yeah,
just, like even that, I think there's a
it's
learning
hard.
space, and it's difficult, but there's a learning space to be able to just be like, I'm going to practice saying this, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
like, can I have your number? Right? Like all of
yeah,
those different
yeah,
asks, right? So
yeah.
it's so powerful. It's such a powerful
No, that definitely relates it, and it is hard. Yes, I
yeah.
don't wanna ever be like, "It's super easy." It is hard. It is hard because we haven't been or taught that it's okay to do these things, to have needs and wants and desires, and to
Yeah.
ask for it, and that people are gonna meet it. It's not something we've been taught.
Yeah. And yet that's where the opportunities began. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so what I'm thinking about is the person who's like, all right, Delisha, I hear you. I actually have some dreams. I don't know where to begin in getting those dreams fulfilled.
Yeah.
My kid actually has some dreams, and I don't know. I don't have any experience with getting these dreams fulfilled. What
Mm,
advice would you offer them in terms of how to begin, where to go, how do they move?
yeah, so this is this is where I've been trying to, like, tend to myself because I can definitely dream more than do, and I'm trying to be as much of a doer as a dreamer.
Hmm.
And the thing that's been really helpful for me has been writing down first the big picture dream. I always need to write it down and then trying to break it down into like small baby steps. I am all about the baby steps right now. Like it is
Hmm.
just like it I actually like love thinking about um life as if it is just babying all over again, because I think sometimes we're like, we get caught up in like, man, I'm this old, or I've lived life this long, I should be able to do this like that, instead of getting back to the phase of like, at one point we didn't know how to talk, at one point we didn't know how to read, at one point we
Mhm.
didn't know how to walk, and we had to take baby steps. And when we were taking those baby steps, people were so compassionate with us and so supportive and
Yeah.
so affirming, hopefully, right? That like, if when you were learning to walk, or when your kid was learning to walk and they fell, that you weren't like, what the fuck is wrong with you, get your ass up, it was just like,
Mhm.
yay, you did it, go again, try again. And so I think cultivating that compassionate, nurturing, supportive voice for yourself, or for the people who you're trying to support as they're trying to take these baby steps in their dreams, is really, really important. And so instead of being like 0 to 100, they're like, I gotta quit my job right now, and I gotta, you
Right.
gotta
And I gotta
get
go
all of
become a
this,
swinger.
however, just like, what is the smallest step you can take towards your dream? And maybe that is just like naming it out loud, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe it's something you've been carrying in your heart and you haven't told anybody else, and you just want to tell somebody, and that is a step. Maybe it is, what, I just want to like look into what are other career opportunities that could be like could be that I could be interested in, and just start like looking into that, and just see like, what is it that this person does in this job, like,
Yeah.
what is it that it means to like align with this like sexual orientation or sexual expression, like, or this sex community. I think we're really hard on ourselves, and so
Yeah.
have the compassion for yourself that you would have for a child who is learning a skill for the first time, and take them baby steps, and celebrate when
Yeah.
you mess up. I am someone who, now that like, I started taking pottery classes 2 years ago, and the first time I broke my my pottery thing broke because I didn't dry it enough. I was like, yeah, I made my first big mistake. Like, celebrating that, and versus being like, oh my God, like, you put so much time and energy into this, and now it failed and you can't even use it. It's like, how
Yeah.
can I just start beginning to be really compassionate and nurturing with myself? And so that's my advice. Baby steps, lots of compassion,
I
lots
love
of like
that.
support and joy, and celebrating yourself, because it is hard. And the fact that you are even choosing to pursue something that you believe in, or that you want, that you desire, is enough to celebrate in itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm realizing this episode, for the homework for this episode. So the folks who've been doing your homework, this is your homework for this episode. I think folks should. What popped in my head was a sex journal. Right. You were talking
Hmm.
about writing down your desires, and like, what would it mean to just write down one thing that you want for your sex life? If it's
Yeah.
something as simple
Yeah.
as, I want to get more comfort with touching myself. I want to get courage with asking someone out. I want, like, just being able to write
Yeah.
those things down. I remember, you reminded me of, in my 20s, the first time I went to a pride event, and I remember feeling like, oh my God, I went to Pride, because that was like a
Yeah.
major hurdle
Yeah.
um on my journey. And I think
Yeah.
that's those little things, you're right. Just being able to celebrate is so, so, so important. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
The dream is as important as the process. We get
Yes.
super product oriented, but the process is so important. And so just, yeah, learning to ask for what you want, write it down, think about it, fantasize about it, celebrate it. That's the beauty. That's the
Yeah.
fun part.
So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna all get journals, and we're gonna start dreaming and writing down our dreams. And then we're gonna take baby steps to make them happen, because Dalychia told us
Yes.
so. So one of my dreams, one of my dreams is gonna be getting my twerk together. But
Yes.
no, let me stop, friend. I've actually gotten better over the quarantine with my twerking. I just
Yes.
recognize that there's certain limits that your knees can get to once you hit my age. That they're just gonna be what they are.
You know, I at
But
my age, I'd be sitting there like, I can't do that. Like, that's okay. My twerk gonna look a little different. It's gonna look a little different, and that's okay. That's what my twerk is. That's what my body can do, and I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yes. Okay, so I have my rapid fire questions coming up in just a bit. But before I get to that, I would like you to share with the people what you feel like it means for you at this moment in history to be who you are as a Black sex educator, offering your voice and your gift to the world. What do you feel like your role, your function, your legacy is at this moment in time?
That is that is such a big question. It's such a big question. And
And I
I
also acknowledge that, like Maya Angelou told Oprah Winfrey, your legacy may not even be realized yet. So I do acknowledge that, but at the
that's
same
real.
time,
That's
you
so
are
real.
moving. So
Oh, thank you. I mean, I hope that I hope that Afrosexology lives way beyond me, and I really hope that in I hope that my legacy is that Black people felt like they had a space to dream and imagine and explore and experience pleasure. Like I really hope that they are all that we're all experiencing really, really, really pleasurable relationships with ourselves and with each other. Like that's what I want. That's what I want. And I also, I move between the sex ed space and like social justice spaces and activist spaces. And so I want people to see that there are skills. I want people to feel like that I have highlight that there are skills in both communities that can support each other and that it can help us get towards liberation. I don't know, Chase, this is a hard question. I don't know.
it's okay. It's
I'm sitting here like I don't know what my legacy is. It's a great question. I hope the I don't hope I'm dead before I see it. That's one thing. I want to be alive and get my roses.
I get that it's a tough question, right? Like I think when I throw in legacy, that does kind of throw a wrench in things. I just really want um and I hope you know that like my perspective for the every all of us that are doing this work, but especially the folks on this platform, is that when they look back at the history of sex ed as a profession, your name's going to be there, right? And I think that matters and that's important because particularly, I don't want to get too much into the technical parts of sex ed, but I think far too often the folks who are considered the pioneers and the trailblazers and those folks are not
Mm,
us, and yet here you are,
mm,
folks like you who are
mm.
literally blazing trails, who are literally advancing new ways to talk about these topics that are valid and they need to be uplifted. And so
Yeah.
that's why I asked that question to
Mm,
have you think about like, yeah, what is my role? Because I think it's tremendous. I think it's tremendous. Period.
yeah. Oh, that makes me thank you for the question. Thank you for that. It makes me really sad that our names are left off because I feel like we would have no Black sexual liberation if it wasn't for Black femmes in
Not at
this
all.
country. None, none. Because when white women were trying to be housewives, Black blues women were out there. Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith were out there talking about husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, like everybody.
Okay,
So
all of it.
being about sexual liberation, sexual freedom. So they ain't none without us. And I really hope that, yeah, that people associate my name with like pleasure and liberation.
Yeah. Ashe. Love it. Okay, you ready for the rapid fire questions?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay. And you've listened to the shows now, so you kind of know where we're going with them, but they're just basic sentence
I
STEM.
don't know my answer.
Okay.
Oh
Well,
my goodness.
just whatever comes up for you. Whatever comes up for you, take as much time as you need. There is no pressure, there is no speed. We're just going to get through it, okay?
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm,
First one.
mhm, mhm.
Sexiness is.
Mm, my body.
Yes. Come on with it. Yes. Talk about it.
Yes, I'm loving my body these days. Yes.
Amen. I was gonna say that moan you did beforehand was sexiness to me. I was like, yes, come on. Come on, ASMR. All right. The sexiest thing about blackness and or black people is.
Everything, everything. Our whole energy, swag, aura, soul. We got a stank. We just put a stank on everything.
That's it.
We just fly. All of us.
Amen. My go-to for feeling sexy is.
Mm. Okay. Yes. Shower in the dark, candles lit, music going.
Wow. Come on, shower. I've done the bathtub shower. That's another experience,
That's
but
it.
that's
That's
beautiful.
it. I love the feeling of water pouring over my head. Like
Ah,
that is
yeah.
so
That's
peaceful to
another
me.
homework assignment, y'all. Y'all gonna have a bath or a shower in the dark. Get some candles. Make sure they're near,
Do
they got
it.
some space so you don't set your bathroom on
Yes,
fire. But that's another
yes.
homework assignment. Yes.
And play some good music. Play some sexy music. Oh, it's
Yes.
perfect.
Love it. Yes, yes, yes. Sexual freedom for Black folk is achieved when?
Ooh, I feel like we got it. We just gotta walk into it. We just gotta step into it. We so close. We so close.
Yeah.
So when we step into it,
Yeah. Come on. It's a seed. Yes. Just cultivate it.
mhm,
Amen.
mhm,
All right.
mhm.
Last one. When I'm done being on this podcast, I will.
Go for a walk and soak up some sun.
Yes, 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 yes.
Mhm.
I've decided I'm not going to use the visual for this, but I'm just looking at the sun beaming on your face. It's beautiful. Absolutely.
I love
And I'm
it.
also,
Mhm.
I want the record to show that you did bring this awesome t-shirt, Less Oppression, More Orgasms, Afrosexology. Please tell the people, how can they find you? How can they get this t-shirt? How can they just keep up with
Yes.
all things Dalychia?
Yes. So we are Afrosexology everywhere. Afrosexology.com, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all over the place. And then I am Dalychia. Dalychia Saah is my website. Dalychia on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Yes, and we will have the website address in the show notes, so please make sure you go there if you need anything else. Thank you again, Dalychia, for being on with me. This conversation was tremendous. I hope it just blesses everyone, and I hope you have an amazing weekend. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Yes, and thank you all for listening. Y'all take care, and I'll talk to you again soon. You've been listening to T.S.O.B. with Dr. G, produced by Dr. Tracy Q. Gilbert of Tembe and Naya. To keep up with all things T.S.O.B., follow us on social media at T.S.O.B. the podcast, which you can find on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. For past episodes of the show, visit tsobpodcast.com or subscribe to the show either on YouTube or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Now, don't forget that you've got homework for this episode. To find the downloadable worksheet for this or any other episode of the show, head on over again to tsobpodcast.com, where you'll find it and any other important information from the show notes. And finally, do you have any questions or thoughts to share? Sound off by email at mailbox@tsobpodcast.com. Again, this was T.S.O.B., the sex ed of Black folk. Thank you for listening. Talk again soon.